The wind howled through the city streets, biting at anyone brave or desperate enough to remain outdoors. It was a night when even the flickering streetlights seemed to shiver in the cold, casting elongated shadows that danced on the frost-laden sidewalks. Beneath one such street lamp, a young woman named Clara pulled her thin, second-hand coat tighter around her. Clara had seen better days, though they had been few and fleeting. Her job at the local diner barely covered rent for her dilapidated apartment, let alone food and other necessities. Still, Clara refused to let the hardships extinguish the quiet kindness that burned in her heart. She was known in her neighborhood for her soft smile and unyielding willingness to help others, even when she had little to give. As she hurried down the icy pavement, the crunch of her worn-out boots echoing, Clara's gaze fell upon a figure huddled on a bench. An older man, his face weathered and hollowed by time and struggle, sat with a thin blanket draped over his trembling frame. His hands, gnarled and reddened by the cold, clutched an empty coffee cup as though it might somehow provide warmth. Clara hesitated. She was already late for her evening shift, and her manager, Mr. Thornton, wasn't known for his patience. Still, the sight of the man's suffering tugged at her. She reached into her pocket, where her last crumpled $20 bill rested. It was meant to cover her own groceries for the week, a meager haul of bread, eggs, and maybe a few cans of soup. Her hand lingered in her pocket, her mind battling her heart. The diner might feed her if she worked late enough, she reasoned. The old man had no such promise. Finally, she approached him. "Excuse me, sir," Clara said softly, kneeling to his level. The man looked up, his eyes glassy and rimmed with exhaustion. "It's freezing out here. Can I help you with something? Maybe get you some food or a hot drink?" The man hesitated, his pride and desperation warring visibly on his face. I don't want to trouble you, miss," he murmured, his voice a whisper against the wind. Clara smiled gently and pressed the $20 bill into his hand before he could refuse. "Here. It's not much, but it'll get you something warm. Please take care of yourself." The man stared at the bill in disbelief, his lips quivering, not from the cold, but from emotion. "Bless you, child," he whispered, tears pooling in his eyes. Clara gave his hand a reassuring squeeze before rising and continuing on her way. She didn't look back, though her heart ached with worry for the man. She hoped he'd find shelter or a meal that would carry him through the night. The next morning, Clara awoke to a knock at her door. Groggy and still in her uniform from the previous night, she shuffled to open it. Standing there was a sharply dressed man in a tailored coat, his salt and pepper hair neatly combed. Behind him, a sleek black car idled at the curb. "Miss Clara?" the man asked, his voice smooth but carrying an air of urgency. "Yes," Clara replied, clutching her robe tightly around her. The man smiled. "My name is James. I'm here on behalf of Mr. Bernard Parker. May I come in?" Clara blinked in confusion. "I'm sorry, who?" James chuckled. "Mr. Parker is the gentleman you helped last night. He insists on speaking with you personally." Before Clara could respond, a second figure stepped out of the car. It was the same man from the bench, though now he stood straighter and wore an impeccably tailored suit. He approached her door with an expression of gratitude so profound it nearly brought Clara to tears. "Miss Clara," he said, his voice stronger now but still warm, "I owe you more than you can imagine." Clara stared at the man in disbelief. The frail, freezing figure she had seen the night before was unrecognizable in his polished attire and confident demeanor. He carried himself like someone accustomed to commanding rooms, not huddling on cold benches. I don't understand," Clara stammered, her cheeks flushing with embarrassment. She suddenly felt acutely aware of her disheveled appearance and modest home. The man smiled, his eyes crinkling with genuine warmth. "Please, may I come in for a moment? I promise I won't take up much of your time." Clara hesitated, glancing at James, who nodded reassuringly. She stepped aside, allowing the two men to enter her small apartment. Bernard Parker, as James had introduced him, took in his surroundings with an expression of quiet admiration. "It's cozy," he remarked, his voice soft but sincere. Clara flushed again. "It's all I can afford right now. I'm sorry it's not much." He turned to her, shaking his head. You have nothing to apologize for. In fact, it's I who owe you an apology, and so much more." Still bewildered, Clara gestured for them to sit at her tiny kitchen table. She hurried to clear away a stack of unpaid bills and set down 2 mismatched mugs, offering them coffee from the pot she'd brewed earlier. "Mr. Parker," Clara began hesitantly, "you said you owe me? But all I did was give you a little money. It wasn't much." "Ah, but it was," Bernard interrupted, his voice firm but kind. "It was everything. You didn't just give me money. You gave me hope when I'd nearly lost it." Clara tilted her head, her curiosity piqued. "You see," he continued, his eyes distant, "I wasn't always the man you found on that bench. I used to be, well, let's just say I was very successful in business. But life has a way of humbling even the proudest among us. A series of bad investments, betrayals by those I trusted most, and my own stubborn pride left me with nothing. Last night, when you found me, I was at my lowest point." Bernard paused, his voice trembling. "I was ready to give up. But then you came along, with nothing but kindness in your heart and a willingness to help a complete stranger. That simple act reminded me that there is still good in the world, still a reason to keep fighting." Clara listened, her own heart aching as she imagined the depths of his despair. "I took that $20, Bernard continued, "and used it to buy a meal and warm myself. But more importantly, I used it as a spark to reignite my determination. I reached out to an old friend this morning, someone I'd been too ashamed to call before. He's agreed to help me rebuild, and I owe it all to you." Clara blinked, struggling to process the weight of his words. "That's incredible. But really, Mr. Parker, I didn't do anything extraordinary. Anyone would have helped." Bernard leaned forward, his gaze piercing yet gentle. "That's where you're wrong, Clara. Many people walk by. Few stop. Even fewer give. What you did was extraordinary, and I intend to repay that kindness 100-fold." Clara opened her mouth to protest, but Bernard held up a hand. "Please, let me finish. This is not about charity. It's about recognizing the power of kindness and paying it forward. I want to help you, Clara. Tell me, what are your dreams?" Clara froze. It had been so long since anyone had asked her that question, she hardly knew how to answer. Dreams had become luxuries she couldn't afford. I don't know," she admitted softly. "Right now, I just focus on getting by." Bernard nodded thoughtfully. "Then let's start there. I'd like to offer you a chance to build something for yourself, a foundation for the future. What would you say to a job with my new venture? Something that matches your skills and helps you grow." Clara's eyes widened. "A job? But I don't even know what you do." "Business development, primarily," Bernard explained. "But I've learned it's about more than just profits. It's about building communities and supporting people like you, people with heart and integrity. I can teach you the ropes." Clara hesitated. It felt too good to be true. "Why me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Bernard smiled, a hint of mischief in his eyes. "Because I believe in second chances, Clara. And because you've already proven that you have the most important qualities of all, compassion and courage." The days that followed were a whirlwind. Bernard made good on his promise, introducing Clara to his network and enrolling her in business courses to develop her skills. She soon found herself working as his personal assistant, learning everything from contract negotiation to team management. But Bernard's generosity didn't stop there. He quietly paid off her debts, ensuring she could focus on her new role without the crushing weight of financial worry. Clara protested at first, but he insisted it was an investment in her potential. As the months passed, Clara's confidence grew. She excelled in her new position, earning the respect of her colleagues and even taking on projects of her own. Bernard's fledgling company began to thrive, and Clara became an integral part of its success. Yet through it all, she never forgot the lesson that had brought her to this point: the power of a single act of kindness. She made it a point to pay her blessings forward, volunteering her time and resources to help others in need. One evening, as she and Bernard sat in his office overlooking the city, she turned to him with a smile. "You've given me so much, Mr. Parker. How can I ever repay you? He chuckled, his eyes twinkling. You already have, Clara. Every life you touch, every act of kindness you extend, that's repayment enough for me. And so, Clara's journey continued, her life forever changed by the simple decision to help a freezing old man on a cold winter's night. As the months turned into years, Clara's life transformed in ways she never imagined. Her career flourished under Bernard's mentorship, and she rose through the ranks of his company, eventually becoming a key decision-maker. The small acts of kindness she had always valued became the cornerstone of her leadership style, inspiring those around her. Bernard, true to his word, treated Clara like a trusted partner, often seeking her input on major decisions. Their company grew rapidly, and Bernard's vision of building communities through ethical business practices gained recognition far beyond their city. With Clara's help, the company initiated programs to support local businesses, provide education for underprivileged youth, and create affordable housing. One snowy evening, as Clara walked home from the office, she noticed a group of children huddled near a corner store. They wore tattered coats, and their laughter was tinged with the kind of resilience born from hardship. She was reminded of her younger self, hungry, cold, and unsure of what the future held. Clara approached the children, offering them the bag of pastries she had bought on her way out of the office. Their eyes lit up, and they thanked her profusely. She crouched to their level and asked gently, "Where are your parents?" One of the older boys shrugged. "Working late, like always. We just hang out here until they come back." Her heart ached for them. "Do you have a safe place to stay?" The boy hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, it's just small. But it's home." Clara smiled. "Home is what you make of it. Stay warm, okay? And take care of each other." As she walked away, she couldn't shake the encounter. That night, she called Bernard and shared her idea for a new initiative. A community center where children could stay after school, with resources to support their education, provide meals, and keep them safe. Bernard listened intently, then agreed without hesitation. "You've always had the heart for this, Clara," he said. "Let's make it happen." The opening of the community center, named Clara's Haven, marked a new chapter in her journey. The center became a beacon of hope for families struggling to make ends meet. Clara spent hours there, mentoring children, organizing events, and even teaching basic life skills. She became a beloved figure in the community, known not just as a successful businesswoman but as someone who truly cared. One evening, while overseeing a workshop at the center, Clara noticed a familiar face among the parents dropping off their children. It was James, Bernard's assistant, now dressed more casually and carrying an air of contentment she hadn't seen before. "James," she called, waving him over. "What brings you here?" He smiled, his eyes softening. "My niece and nephew attend the center. Their parents are working late shifts, and this place has been a godsend. Thank you for creating it." Clara's chest swelled with pride and gratitude. "I'm glad we could help. How's everything with you?" James chuckled. "I'm good, Clara. Bernard made me his partner in another venture. He's semi-retired now, traveling and enjoying life. But he always asks about you and the center. He's proud of what you've accomplished." Clara felt a pang of warmth. Bernard had become like family to her, a constant source of encouragement and wisdom. She made a mental note to call him and thank him once more. One winter night, 3 years after that fateful meeting on the bench, Clara received an unexpected visit. An elderly woman with silver hair and a kind smile knocked on her office door. Clara invited her in, offering tea as they sat by the large windows overlooking the city. "Miss Clara," the woman began, her voice trembling slightly, "I'm sorry to trouble you, but I needed to see you in person. My name is Martha, and I wanted to thank you." Clara tilted her head, puzzled. "Thank me? I'm not sure I understand." Martha reached into her purse and pulled out a photograph of a younger Bernard, smiling brightly. "That's my brother. He told me about you, the young woman who saved him when he'd lost everything. He passed away last week, peacefully in his sleep." Clara's heart sank, tears springing to her eyes. "Oh, Martha, I'm so sorry." Bernard was. He was one of the kindest, most inspiring people I've ever known. Martha placed a hand over Clara's. And he thought the same of you. Before he passed, he told me to make sure you knew how much you meant to him. He said you reminded him of the goodness in the world, and it gave him the strength to rebuild his life." Clara wiped her tears, overwhelmed by the weight of Martha's words. "He gave me so much, more than I could ever repay." Martha smiled. He didn't see it that way. He believed that kindness creates ripples, and you've carried his legacy forward in ways he could only dream of. Clara's Haven is proof of that. In the years that followed, Clara continued to expand her efforts, opening more community centers and funding scholarships for children who reminded her of herself. Bernard's story, and the moment that had brought them together, became a tale she often shared, inspiring others to embrace compassion and never underestimate the impact of a single act of kindness. And though Clara never sought recognition, she became a symbol of hope in the city, a testament to the idea that even the smallest gestures could spark life-changing transformations. For Clara, it was never about fame or fortune. It was about the warmth in a freezing old man's eyes and the knowledge that, sometimes, one moment of kindness could change the world.